I am Sid, founder of the SID Podcast. And today, on our environmental portion of the podcast, we're going to be hosting Dr. Matthews on the topic of why he feels that renewable energy sources are better than nuclear energy. Mr. Matthews is a scientist and pushes for renewable energy to be used more, and has only been given 15 minutes to prepare a statement. He will include information about the environment, economy, kilowatt need, and feasibility, and must ultimately tie it back to the impact on climate and society, sustainability, and scientific concepts. Dr. Matthews, the show is yours. Thank you. So by 2050, the global population is projected to be around 9.7 billion, according to a report by the UN. Currently, about 80% of the world uses electricity, and that number is certain to go up. The world consumed 1,426 terawatt hours of energy in 2012, according to statistics from the International Energy Agency. So assuming that there are no new technologies that will consume a lot of energy, which is highly unlikely, and assuming that the 20% of the world that doesn't use electricity will stay the same, which is even more unlikely, the world will start consuming closer to 150,000 terawatt hours of energy. So today, I'll be talking about why I think that renewable energy is the way to go for the future of our planet, giving plenty of valid reasons. So since renewable energy sources have grown in terms of size and money going to them, and also have become much cheaper, a trend has formed that promoters of nuclear energy and deniers of climate change are also deniers of renewable energy and its validity as a global source of energy. The same people who will tell you that climate change isn't real will also tell you that renewable energy isn't realistic. This, of course, is untrue. Now, I'm going to read a quote from Mark Dissendorf, the Associate Professor of Interdisciplinary Environmental Studies at the University of South Wales, Australia. He writes that clean, safe, renewable energy technologies have the potential to supply 1,000% of the world's electricity demand. But the first hurdle is to refute the deliberately misleading myths designed to promote the politically powerful but ultimately doom nuclear industry. But my quote isn't to only talk about nuclear energy's flaws, so I'll move away from that for now. So, the renewable sources of energy that I'll be talking about, or I'll be focusing about, are hydropower, wind power, solar power, and I'm not going to be focusing on less common ones such as biomass and geothermal energy, but those are still very important. So if we talk about Canada's statistics for a sec rather than the entire world, just so that we can get some scope, renewable energy sources currently provide about 18.9% of Canada's total primary energy supply. There is room for this number to grow, and it most likely will, as Canada is a world leader in the production and use of energy from renewable sources. Within this, hydropower is definitely the most important source of renewable energy in Canada. It's already supplying 59.3% of Canada's electricity generation, and for those of you who don't know, the force of moving water turns a turbine that generates electricity. Bodies of water such as Niagara Falls generate electricity like this. So as you can see from the graph that I'll have up on the screen, I found this interesting. Quebec supplies more hydroelectricity than any other province or territory in Canada. And as long as we have moving water to harness energy from, we can continue to take advantage of this and improve our technology along the way to make sure that we can increase the amount of energy that is generated by hydroelectricity or hydropower for a growing population in Canada and eventually worldwide. So moving on, wind is the second most important renewable energy source in Canada, accounting for 3.5% of electricity generation in the entire country. It is also one of the fastest growing sources of energy in Canada. It moves by turning a turbine with winds that generates electricity. Solar energy is another important energy source that works by turning light from the sun into electricity. This happens when photons hit the panel and knock electrons off of their atoms, creating the flow of electrons, which is electric flow. An article by Ariel Schwartz on the website Fast Company presented these two maps depicting the space needed to power the entire world's electricity need using either only wind turbines and no other source, or solar panels with no other source. Both graphs use the 2030 projections for power needs of humanity. This is the entire world, not Canada. So if we look at the first graph right now, this is for offshore wind power. This differs a little bit from inland wind power, which is what you usually picture with the grassy field with the wind turbines. This is actually on the coast over the ocean for the ocean mist, but the point that's made with this is the same, that very little space is needed. So keep in mind that both of the graphs I'm showing you now take into account the expanding population of the future, which is one of the points that I was told to address in this podcast. So as we can see, only a few key places: the U.S. Eastern and Western Seaboard, Alaska, the Hudson Bay in Canada, Britain and Spain, along with northeastern Europe, Japan, China, the Philippines, the Pacific Islands, the east coast of Australia. All of these places, I could go on forever, but all of these places are definitely vital places, as most of them are major population centers, or there's space for us to use there. So let's move on to solar power. So solar power is even more astounding to me, and this graph shows that solar panels would actually take up significantly less space than the wind turbines. So if we look at it, again, a lot of these are deserts. We have the California desert in America. We have these are really hot areas or near the equator. So I believe it's the Mojave Desert that is shown in North America, along with other patches, one in Mexico, one in Alberta. In the Sahara Desert, there's another one in South Africa. Of course, in the Middle East, there are quite a few. In Rajasthan Desert in India, there's one. In the Gobi Desert, there's another. And the Outback in Australia has another. So all of these are known deserts, and they get lots of sunlight, and putting them strategically in these areas could potentially power the world in 2030. So now, I know we're running short on time, so I'm just going to bring everything that I presented together. So consider this. What if we combine these sources of renewable energy? We know that space isn't a hindrance from the two maps we looked at. And if we looked at a bit of all of these generation methods, we ensure clean, reliable energy solutions for the entire planet. So smaller sources of renewable energy, such as geothermal and biomass energy, can be implemented in places that they are deemed productive. I didn't talk about them because they can't be used exactly everywhere, but where they can be used, they're just as effective as these. So, for example, you can use geothermal in Iceland, and the same goes for biomass, where you have a lot of wasted wood. You can use that. I understand I didn't touch on these as much as the other three, but they'll be covered another time perhaps, as I'm pressed on time. So the final point that I will leave you with is that these renewable, highly sustainable methods are based on solid science, and we have the means to implement them. But the most important thing from all this is that the generation methods pose very little risk to mankind itself. Can we say the same about nuclear energy, which will always pose the risk of nuclear waste and leakage, which has to transport this waste to special facilities where they will simply be for the hundreds of thousands of years? They will remain toxic, where the transport of this waste can be a target for potential terrorists, where the public stigma around the dangers of nuclear energy will never fully come to rest? I don't have the answers to any of these questions, but I think you understand what I mean. In short, nuclear energy is an attractive solution today, but maybe not in a few years when it takes its toll on the environment, or when accidents start to happen. And I can assure you that they will happen. Another good way to look at this, and this will be the last thing I say, is that the sun will always shine, the wind will always blow, and rivers will always flow. So why not use these natural occurrences to our advantage? Thank you. Back to you, Sid. Thank you, Dr. Matthews. I'm sure you spurred quite some discussion amongst the people tuned in at home. That concludes the podcast for today. This is Sid, and as always, see you tomorrow.